But the questions that come from the audience will be written on the cards, and you can turn them in at the table in the back. There might be a time in the middle where we'll have somebody come around if you have a question that you thought of later, but there will be no questions, no voice questions from the floor, so they all need to be in writing.
How's it going?
Good. I gotta be in your way?
No, you're good, man.
All right, good evening, everybody. We are going to get started. I want to thank you for coming out tonight to take part in the candidate forum for Senate District 24. There's been a lot of different people involved in putting this evening together tonight, and so initially I would like to
my stuff down matters in my channel, so that's what I'm
Okay, so it will be.
We'll be out.
Community Action Chair. The two district leaders from the House districts that make up Senate District 24 are Sam Call from House District 47. And there's Sam. And House District 48, Marcia Snyder is in the back waiting at us. We also are lucky to have other House District leaders here from 41 at least, and I don't want to miss anybody, but there's been a lot of people, so thank you. Tonight is an important part, I think, of governing. It's a part of starting to learn about the candidates so that you can make an informed decision when it comes time to vote. And the Multnomah County Democrats are really happy to be able to sponsor this type of forum, and we look forward to having some more throughout the campaign season as we work up to the elections next week in May.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to this.
So, you know, there are several steps to governing. One is learning about the candidates. One is having great candidates who step up and say, I'm going to run, I'm going to help make this state, this city, this county a better place to live. And so that's why we've got three great candidates that we're going to meet tonight. You know, there are other ways to get involved. Once the candidates get elected, it's important that every one of us be involved in helping them, in supporting them to do the work they do, and pushing them to do the work that we want them to do. Right? So it's kind of a two-way street, I think. And then there are times in governing where we might find ourselves out on the street, marching, protesting, but tonight we have the civil part of governing, which is learning about the candidates. So just a couple of things. I want you to know that the bathrooms are in the back corner there in case you need those. I think there was one other important announcement, but I don't know what it was. So let me just describe tonight's format. We've got three candidates. I've got a little envelope of straws here, and there are different lengths. The candidate with the longest straw will go first, and once they pick the straws. And then once we start that process, we will follow along in alphabetical order. So, there we go. Right. We'll start out the evening with each candidate. We've got 3 questions. Each candidate will have an opportunity to speak to 3 minutes to the question. And so we'll start with the first candidate, then the next candidate based on alphabetical order, and then the last candidate, and then we'll move to the next question and continue that process. And then in the middle of the evening, we will take the questions from the floor. So don't forget to write those questions down on the cards you have. You know that if you have a question for Kayse Jama, you write it on the orange card. If you have a question for Senator Monroe, you write it on the yellow card. And if you have a question for Shamia Fagan, you write it on the green card. If the question is for all 3, put it on the pink card. Any questions about that process? So I just want to ask the candidates. So the process can work pretty well if we all agree that when the time is up, the time is up. Will we all agree to that? So the timekeeper is Michelle Risher here. On the 3-minute questions, she will raise the 1-minute time card, so you know you have 1 minute left, then the 30-second time card, and then the stop. I don't want to have to come and take the mic away, so I hope you'll agree to stop when it says stop. Is that agreeable? Okay, great. Have I announced everything correctly, Sandy?
I wasn't paying attention.
Okay. I think it's correct. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to get the straws out. Someone has stole the straws. I stole the straws. Okay, who has the longest straw? I guess you got it. So the first, Kayse, here's the first question, and this question will be for each candidate, but you'll get to start. If you're elected as our state senator, what would your top 2 priorities be in your first term in office? The problems you hope to solve, and barriers to anticipate, and your strategies to accomplish them.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the organizers who put together this amazing event. And thank you very much for also other candidates for candidates who came. My name is Kayse Jama, and I am running for Senate District 24. You know, I came to this country as a refugee from Somalia, and this country gave me everything that I have, and I want to give back. The reason I'm running is that, let me tell you a little bit of history about my background. When my father grew up, my dad used to go to the market, and he had to take with him a rope every single day. He was a middleman where they sell gold and camels. And that rope, he would then find out someone who's willing to sell something, a gold or camel. And when he find out a seller, he will look for a buyer. And that's how he make his living. Some days he will bring the road empty because he was not able to sell anything. And my mom will actually start boiling water because she will expect that maybe he will bring something for the family. That's the background. And I understand the community in this district. There's a kids who are going hungry because their mom and dad are one paycheck away to be homeless. I have been a community organizer in this district for the last 17 years. And I have seen it. There's even a gentleman here in this room that I actually knocked his door 5 years ago. I knocked on hundreds of doors trying to understand what issues this district is facing. I know how people are struggling. We have one of the most diverse districts in the state. This district, 37% of the population are people of color. 26% of the families are receiving food stamps. That's more than double of the national average. So you have to understand that people are struggling in this district. You know, my wife's driver license was stolen from our mailbox. My car was stolen from in front of our house. People are struggling in this district. We need a new leadership. We need people who are willing to advocate for veterans' rights. We want to make sure that people are represented in Salem. I want economic justice. I want to make sure that our education system is supported and we have full funding for our schools. I want to protect people's civil rights. One of the ways I'm going to do that, I am a community organizer. If I be given the opportunity to serve business, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bring people with me to Salem. Because that's who I am. That's what I do. And that's a strategy that I'm going to go to bring people with me. Thank you.
Does anybody need me to read the question again?
Well, I can do that. It says here, if you were elected to the state senate, what would be your 2 priorities in your first term in office? Well, it's a little hard for me to answer since I've been a BCP since 1974 and an elected official since 1977. My first term in office happened a long time ago, but I certainly have priorities for the coming session. Important priorities. I'm fighting for the Clean Energy Jobs Bill. Clean Energy Jobs Bill is one of the top priorities of the Democratic Party in Oregon. I believe it will make a tremendous difference in terms of dealing with global warming, in terms of dealing with the necessity of new jobs in clean industry. And so that's why I'm one of the sponsors of that measure. Also, I was involved in the transportation funding package that passed in the last session. One of the most remarkable pieces of legislation because it was both bicameral and also had support from all different elements around the state. So I'm going to be monitoring the transportation package. I worked very hard to get $110 million in that package to finally fix Cal Boulevard. Cal Boulevard has needed work for a long time. It's a dangerous 2-lane road, and with this $110 million, it will be a fine new boulevard, and then we'll transfer its jurisdiction over to the city of Portland, where it should be instead of the state. Also, part of that package was transit. Worked very hard to double the amount of public transit available in our state to make sure that was in the package. Safe roads to schools. We're going to be building sidewalks in southeast Portland. Won't that be nice? I served 10 years on the David Douglas School Board, and those kids had no sidewalks to get to school, and so I had to ride on the school bus, of course. We need sidewalks, we need transit, And I'm going to be making sure that the $5.3 billion package pays for those things that the legislature identified. Thank you.
Well, good evening. My name is Shamia Fagan, and my top two priorities, if elected, are first and foremost, secure and affordable housing. That includes ending no-cause evictions, making sure the city of Portland has the tools to stop the skyrocketing rents, making sure that any person facing eviction has access to an attorney, and allowing tenants to collectively bargain their leases with their landlords. And number two, my second priority, healthcare for all. Yes. As I have been out knocking on doors for Measure 101, and listening to people who are terrified that they're going to lose their health insurance, I'm once again reminded that our patchwork system is not working and is not reliable enough for the people who need it most. So let's go win Measure 101 next Tuesday, and then let's go pass single payer in Oregon. But in order to accomplish these priorities, we need a Senate that works for us and not for special interests. In the last couple of years, critically important, life-changing progress has stopped dead in the Senate or been severely weakened. So it's not just that we need a new senator. We need a revolution in the Oregon Senate. As a mom of young kids, I have a sense of urgency about where we live and how we make it better. And during my time on the David Douglas School Board and in the Oregon House, that's what kept me pushing every single day for changes that make life better for working people. And as you can imagine, always pushing, I didn't always make friends. In fact, that's probably why one lobbyist once told the Willamette Week, anonymously, quote, Shamia Fagan is intense and downright scary. It wouldn't surprise me if she's a cage fighter on the side. Well, the lobbyist did not mean it as a compliment, but if given a choice between go along, get along with special interests and a cage fight, I will take up that fight for our progressive values every single time.
Thank you. Just a reminder, if you have questions that you would like to ask the candidates, please be sure to write them down on the cards and get them to the back table. The second question, and in this question, Rod Monroe will be first, Shamia Fagan will be second, and Kayse Jama will be third. The question is, given the challenges that our district has regarding housing, homelessness, and gentrification, how do you understand these issues? And what kind of solutions will you pursue towards solving them?
Well, thank you very much. Very important issue in our state. I've been meeting with Speaker Tina Kotek. Tina and I are good friends, and twice in the last couple of months she came to my office and said, Rod, we've got to do something about housing, and I'm going to need your help. She said, now, my priorities in the last session was something called Bill 2004. It passed the House by one vote. It had only 6 votes in the Senate, so it didn't pass. So she said, my priority in the next session, 2018, is going to be to find a funding source for more subsidized housing and more low-income housing. Now, a lot of people misunderstand what is meant by low-income. Low-income, to some people, is a 2-bedroom rent of $1,000 or $1,200. An awful lot of people can't afford that if they're on a fixed income. So we're talking about a statewide Section 8 type program for subsidized housing, and we need a funding source to do that. So it's been suggested, and I talked to Tina about this, that the document recording fee is perhaps a way to go. And I've talked to realtors, and they've even indicated they might be willing to support that. So if we can get a funding source and build more housing that's truly low income, that really low-income people can't afford, we can help solve the housing problem. Another problem that we're facing is homelessness. I live near the Springwater Trail, so I know about homelessness. It's all along there. When I see them, when I ride my bicycle or when I go for a jog. How are we going to deal with this? Part of the problem with homelessness is the need for mental health and better mental health programs. Many of those people have severe mental health problems. Also, some of the shelters have very restrictive rules. For example, they can't take their pet, or perhaps they can't occupy a shelter room with their partner. And so I think it's very important that we look at some of those rules, build more shelters, deal with the mental health crisis, find a funding source to build more housing, and I will be working with the speaker and others to make sure that happens.
In 1997, my big brother was driving us to East Portland to see my mom for the first time in a few years. I was 15 and my dad was raising us as a single parent in Eastern Oregon. We hadn't seen my mom a lot because she was struggling with drug addiction and was living on and off the streets in East Portland. But she finally had a home and invited us to come visit. And I remember my brother pulled up to this big, beautiful Victorian-style house with a huge wraparound porch. And we were like, whoa, Mom, nice house. She greeted us at the front lawn and then walked us around to the front steps. But instead of walking up the steps, she dropped down to her hands and knees and she crawled under the porch. And then she invited us into her home. My brother and I dropped down to our knees and we crawled into the porch behind her. We spent the day with her there. I remember she had a sleeping bag unzipped to cover the dirt floor, and my mom, like most people experiencing homelessness, didn't have a U-Haul. So she showed us the one box that she kept with her, which is full of pictures of us and letters from us. Too many politicians approach Oregon's housing crisis as a series of empty statistics, but not me. I know that everybody out there trying to make a home or keep a home, that is somebody's somebody. That's somebody here, that's somebody's brother, that's somebody's aunt, or that's somebody's mom. And that's why my first legal job was as a pro bono attorney representing Oregonians facing eviction. And I was overwhelmed by the fear my clients lived with every single day. Families with little kids crowded in my office, not sure where they're sleeping that night. I couldn't help but think of my mom and the nights she spent sleeping outside or in a shelter or feeling lucky to be under a porch. We are in the midst of a code-red housing crisis, and only big solutions are going to make a difference. Should we build more affordable housing? Of course, but we cannot build our way out of this crisis. So it's time to end no-cause evictions, make sure that the city of Portland can control skyrocketing rents, make sure that every person facing eviction has access to an attorney to protect their civil rights, and allow tenants to collectively bargain their leases.
So, you know, for me, housing issues and homelessness is very, very important to me. As I said earlier, I grew up as a nomad, and actually I grew up in Hartford and family was living. When I come to this district, I live a few blocks away from a homeless shelter. I see every single day people struggling. Let me tell you a story about what I did as a community organizer. A few years ago, I went door-to-door knocking at large apartments where immigrant refugee community members are living. We talked to them, we discussed with them their issues, and we realized that there's actually huge issues that they're facing. Their apartments were full of mold, full of cockroaches, and they were trying to figure out how to live in that kind of condition. Imagine a child living and sleeping in that kind of condition. You know what we did? We didn't say we're gonna talk to the state. We said we're gonna organize and support you to be your own voice, to advocate for your own advocacy. And we trained them, and we helped them to write letters to the landlords. And you know what? When the landlords didn't respond, you know what we did? We asked them to call the city of Portland to inspect those apartments. And then what they inspected found hundreds of violations. That is the conditions that the community in this district are living. So yes, I agree, we need no end and no cost evictions. Yes, we want to make sure that we have rent control. Those are important. And yes, we need to build more affordable housing. But more importantly, we want to make sure people who are impacted by the issue are at the table, engage their own issue and their own problems to solve. So that's the number one priority as a community organizer. That's what we're going to do. Secondly, if you go and move forward and talk to the community, you know what? We want to make sure, one, those who are wanting to own homes have the ability and accessibility to own homes. Those who want to rent, we want to make sure that they have affordable rent. The condition that Portland and this district is unattainable for many community members. Yes, we want to make sure we build affordable housing. But more important to me, at the end of the day, these issues are complex and interconnected with other issues. We want to make sure that we have economic justice. We want to make sure that we have a paid family leave. We want to make sure that we have affordable housing. Those are interconnected. We want to make sure we deal with education issues. Those issues, if you deal with collectively those issues and you uplift people on the bottom, the people that I work every single day, those are the ways to solve those issues in order to make sure that we have a community that is livable, that community is thriving. Thank you. Woo.
And now for our final question. Just a reminder, if you all have questions from the audience, get them written down on the cards and take them to the back table. Don't want you to miss out. So the final question, and the order will be Shamia, Kayse, and Rod. Education in Oregon has struggled for a long time, with high school graduation at unacceptably low levels and college out of reach for many Oregonians. Our future is at risk. What are your priorities and what can we do?
Okay, so it's 1991. I am a 10-year-old girl living in Dufur, Oregon. Anyone know where Dufur is? Okay, thank you. As I mentioned, my dad was a single parent and we struggled to meet kind of our basic needs. In fact, I remember at one point we went on this really cool 2-week camping trip as a kid. And I was an adult when I learned that we'd actually been homeless, but my dad didn't want us to know, so camping. So I didn't have a lot of stability at home, so I was a kid that acted out in school. But my 4th grade teacher invited me to join an after-school chess club. And by the end of that year, I traveled from tiny little Dufur, Oregon to Portland and won the Oregon State Chess Tournament. And I will never forget the way that I felt when I walked out of that parking lot. And my 2 older brothers, who were usually picking on me, were hoisting my trophy over their heads and chanting, "My sister's the chess champion." And for the first time in my life, I knew it doesn't matter that I don't have everything that other kids have. I can compete with anyone. And it was strong Oregon schools that made that true. But stories like mine are becoming the exception with our chronically underfunded schools. And that's because too many politicians pay lip service to schools during an election year and then back down from the fight with wealthy special interests that starve our schools of funding. Just last year, our Senate had an opportunity to eliminate a tax break for wealthy business owners. It was called the Suits and Scrubs tax break. The House voted to eliminate it. Eliminating this one tax break would have saved us $200 million for our schools. What happened? Well, it died in the Senate. And once again, a budget was passed that underfunds our schools. And then the Senate celebrated this substandard budget. And on the day that the budget was passed, one senator even said that we should, quote, host a parade for him for passing this budget. Now, I love me a good parade. And if we fully fund our schools, I will twirl a baton in the parade. But this budget does not reduce class sizes. It does not fully fund service for English language learners. It does not fund a full school year, doesn't put a nurse and a counselor and a librarian in every school, does not fund wraparound services for vulnerable kids, and doesn't vigorously support kids with disabilities. So until we do then, let's keep the parade floats in the garage and do the hard work of making corporations pay their fair share in Oregon.
So, I'm a father of twins, and they are here in this room tonight. Where is Sahan Sahala? Where are you? Hi. They are second graders. They are part of the changing demographics of this district and this state. 61% of the kids in my kids' school are people of color and immigrant refugees. We need to make sure that we deal with the issues of workforce diversity. Although 61% are people of color, children, and immigrant refugees, 95% of the workforce at the school is white. That's a problem to me because we want to make sure that the kids are able to relate people who are teaching and supporting them. Secondly, many of people will say, you know what, the solution of the education is more funding. Yes, we need more funding for our education system and we need to be fully funding our education system. But we also know that there's 60,000 homeless kids in this state, including in our own district here. Secondly, as we move forward, we want to make sure that we address the issues of disciplinary disparities. We want to make sure that the kids are seen as full human beings who are, if they need homes, they make sure that the teachers are addressing and schools are addressing the issues in a holistic way. They know that they have a home to go. So housing, of course, is attached to it. We want to make sure that if they need mental health counseling, there's available for them. If their parents need jobs, we want to make sure that there's economic justice for them and there's ways to connect the issues to economic justice. So to me, all these are intertwined. So by just simply saying that we need more funding, it's not a solution. We need to go beyond saying funding, and that's the only answer we have. So to me, working with the community, working with the schools, those are the solutions that I want to bring together if I have been given the opportunity to ensure we have equitable education for all. And we have to make sure that the kids of color, immigrant refugees, are graduating same level as their white counterparts. That is what I call equity and inclusion. And if I've been given the opportunity, I will champion equity and inclusion by making sure that our education system is equitable for all. Thank you.
Well, education. I was a teacher for 20 years and a teacher leader elected by my fellow teachers to be the OEA building rep. And then I went on to be a college professor after that, teaching history and government. And then in the legislature for the last decade, I've been co-chair of the Education Subcommittee of Ways and Means. And the co-chair of the Education Subcommittee of Ways and Means is a nice job, nice sounding job, but it didn't come with a printing press. And so I've been fighting every session in the legislature for more revenue for our schools. In the last session, we had a governor recommending $7.9 billion for K-12 schools. The leaders in the Senate and House said, oh no, we can do better than that. We can go to $8.1 billion. That came to me and I said, not enough. And I was able personally to get that increase to $8.2 billion. Now that doesn't sound like much of a difference between $8.1 billion and $8.2 billion, but that's $100 million. And today in David Douglas and in Park Rose, and in other school districts around, they are actually hiring more teachers to reduce class size and to improve the situation. Also, I found that too many of our schools don't provide the kind of work relief that we all need. So I went to work with some of my fellow senators on something called the Oregon Promise. The Oregon Promise provides 2 years of basically free community college education for students that have a 2.5 GPA or better. Now, I was a teacher, so I know what a 2.5 GPA is. But we're working on, we're moving on. And the priority for the next session is something called the Committee on Student Success. And this is going to operate the same way the Transportation Committee operated. It's going to travel all around the state and listen to people and try and find out what funding people are willing to accept. 3 of the members of my subcommittee are on that committee: Senator Roblin, Representative Diego Hernandez, and Representative Barbara Smith Warner. So hopefully we can get this done in the same bipartisan way that we got the transportation package done. And I have committed and will continue to commit to vote for any progressive tax increase to fund education, especially higher corporation taxes.
So those are the prepared questions. Now for the questions from the audience. And it looks like most of them are going to be for all 3 candidates. So as a reminder, you have 1 minute for each question. And the first question has to do with campaign finance. And we will go in the order of Kayse Jama, Monroe, and Shamia Fagan. So the question is, how does taking money from corporations, PACs, and large donors affect your campaign and how you will govern?
So it's an important question. And in 2000, I believe it was 2007, I was appointed as the first Public Finance Commission in the city of Portland, because the issues I deeply care, because we need to make sure that we remove money from our politics. That's really important if we want to have a true democracy. Secondly, as I was planning my campaign, and someone who's a champion about making sure we have public finance in our state. So if I get given the opportunity, I will fight for public finance campaign at state level, for sure. In my own campaign, I decided not to accept corporate private donations and only accepted donations from community members and small individually owned businesses. That is who is financing my campaign, because I do not believe free money. When somebody gives you a $5,000 check, I bet you they will come to cash out. And I don't believe that. So that's one of my fundamental issues, that running with a public finance campaign, if we have the opportunity to make it, and making sure that I will not accept corporate donations. Thank you.
Well, I've been in the legislature quite a while, and I've voted for every attempt at campaign finance reform. Unfortunately, none of them have passed. So what do we do? What do you do when people want your job and other people say, well, I've got some money here to help you. Do you take it or not take it? That's always a question. I have never, ever traded my vote for anything. Ever. Well, I'm sorry, sir, it's a fact. And I will continue, when I am reelected, I will continue with that policy, that no strings attached to any dollars that are given for my campaign.
I wish I had some corporate money to turn down or donate to a good cause in this race, but definitely, if they made a decision in this race, it's not to support me. And I'm fine with that, because the democracies really function on principles of accountability, representation, and participation. And our current campaign finance system really disregards those principles. when we have, big donors are able to come in and make it where there isn't much competition in a race because somebody can just get reelected over and over again and outspend their opponents, we don't have true accountability. And how do we get representation from working people and parents who don't have time to spend half their week raising money? And again, how do we get participation from people when we put forward the same people over and over again, year after year? And so it is time that we restore our faith in our publicly financed elections. And that way our elected leaders are accountable to us, and they are representative of us, and the participation process is open to anybody with a passion to make change.
Thank you. The next question, which will be for 1 minute, is on transportation, and the order will be Rod Monroe, Shamia Fagan, and Kayse Jama. So the question is, East Portland has the highest percentage of people reliant on public transit in the region. Last year, the legislature provided TriMet with a new source of funding. However, the legislation gave a lot of latitude to agencies like TriMet. Given the funding is a regressive payroll tax on employees, what are you going to do, specifics please, to ensure this new funding serves low-income people and not be sucked up to provide more transit to commuters to downtown when congestion pricing on I-5 becomes a reality?
And I'm already working on that. The reason I was able to get transit funding doubled in this state was because I was a part of a special committee. And I argued that we need north-south bus routes in the outer Portland area, not just into the city and out. And so TriMet has assured me that when they start spending this additional hundreds of millions of dollars, that they will be putting those routes through from south to north over to where the jobs are along Marine Drive and over along the Columbia River.
It's unfortunate that we can't pass or eliminate a tax break on suits and scrubs and wealthy business owners, but we can pass tax increases on working people to fund the services that we need. So, public transit is an incredible opportunity. All we have to do is look at Los Angeles and other crowded areas to know that bigger freeways, wider freeways, they don't solve traffic problems. And for a fraction of the cost, we can invest in our public transit, bike and pedestrian options, and without the environmental harms as well. And so one thing we have to do is to be smart about that and make sure that we're not passing on the cost to the very people that we are trying to help, but then allowing wealthy people and corporations in Oregon to pay the lowest tax rate in the country.
Transportation is very, very important, and it has to be affordable and accessible to all community members. So to me, the last bill that passed in the Senate in Salem, one of the issues that I have is that we are taxing poor working class community members. It's time that we make sure that corporations pay their fair share. Secondly, even TriMet, the rides are going up in the sky, and they're getting more expensive. We want to make sure that the people who are in this district are able to afford public transportation. We need more public transportation. Secondly, one of the things that's been proposed is that they're going to put a tolls near the crosswater. To me, someone who just been displaced from East Portland, and now they have to go back and work in downtown or near downtown. Now guess what? They have to pay just to go to the road. So to me, that's not okay. I'm against it, and we want to make sure that whatever we come up with, it has to be equitable for all.
The next question will be Shamia, Kayse, and Rod. It's on Measure 101. And at any time, if you want me to reread the question, be sure to let me know. What is Plan B if Measure 101 does not pass? There
is no Plan B. We have to pass Measure 101. It's an absolute must pass. That's why our campaign has been focused on knocking doors and recruiting volunteers to knock doors for Measure 101. In fact, as of today, our campaign has knocked 1,412 doors for Measure 101. In fact, let's do a little GOTV right here. Raise your hand if you haven't turned in your ballot yet. Don't be shy, I haven't either. Okay, awesome. Do you know where your ballot is? Do you have a blue or black pen at home? Okay, great. Do you know where your nearest ballot location is? And what's your plan when you plan to turn on your ballot? Awesome. Folks, yes, those are our GOTV questions. We ask those 4 questions to every single person that we know. There is no plan B. We have to pass Measure 101. Then let's pass this and go fund single payer in Oregon.
I agree with Shamia. There is no plan B, and we have to make sure Measure 101 has to pass. But more importantly, also, as we move forward, we need to have to make sure that we have a single payer, as you said, as well. But thirdly, if whatever reason this measure passes, I really want to hope that we want to make sure that we start making our corporations pay their fair share. We have to make sure that we have the fund available to all people in our community. So for me, Measure 101 is super important. Please vote. Please encourage your community members to vote yes for Measure 101. And finally, in order to make sure that we have to get where we need to be, it's absolutely important that we have to engage people where they are and have conversations to bring them along with us to ensure that we vote for yes for Measure 101. So please, yes, Measure 101, and please, let's make it happen. Thank you.
We all agree. I have already voted for Measure 101 twice. I got to vote for it in the Senate, and then Julie Parrish decided she wanted to put it on the ballot. So then I got to vote again to move the election from November up to January so that we would know that the money is there. I strongly support single-payer health care, but in the meantime, the Affordable Care Act has been a good first step. And I've strongly supported the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act, though it doesn't go as far as I would like to see it go. It's interesting. You asked what's Plan B. I agree with my colleagues here that there is no Plan B, but I'll tell you what will happen if it doesn't pass. We have 2 choices. Either kick 400,000 children off of health care and a lot of senior citizens, or go back to the budgets like the $8.2 billion education budget and slash them. I'm not willing to do either one of those things.
So the Multnomah County Democrats believe the same way, and we've been out getting slate cards passed out to encourage people to vote. I think I heard that we're up around 20,000 slate cards that have been passed out, and we find that when those cards arrive on people's doors, more people vote than if they don't. So we can
You want to help us do that?
We can use you all to help us, and if any of you are interested in getting involved with the Democratic Party of Oregon, John's got some slate cards, the Democratic Party of Multnomah County, you can file to become a PCP. So anybody can get on the ballot to be an elected member of the Democratic Party, and there are forms in the back if you want to do that. I want to remind you also about the 50-50 raffle. Anybody who's interested in getting tickets, we will draw at the end, and whoever's number is drawn will get half of the proceeds that end up in the basket. So I got my few. If anybody else wants one, you can get them right here. So the next question is a little bit longer. It has to do with children in poverty. And we will be back to Kayse, Rod, and Shamia. Is that right? Do we all agree? Yeah, I agree. Concentrations of poverty are already well known in Oregon, as obvious as zip codes. Young children starting school under adverse childhood experience are also concentrated in easily identified areas. do to meet the needs of these schools where the concentration of need creates an exponentially more challenging educational environment?
So for me, the important thing is that, as I said earlier, there's 60,000 children who are homeless in this community, in this state, including our own district. So we have to make sure that we really work hard to, first of all, have the resources to provide support for the families who are struggling. So to me, one of the most important things I keep saying and again is that we have to make sure we have the money to pay services that are needed in our community, whether it's schools, or whether it's housing, or whether it's education. So that's really the number one priority I will be focusing to ensure that we have to, corporations have to pay their fair share. And we have to make sure that our children in the school system has to be supported and have to be uplifted from the poverty to make sure that they have successful education opportunities. And in order to do that, we have to invest also and create jobs, economic justice, and that's one of the things that I'm going to be doing if I've been elected. Thank you.
Well, the advantage I have of being a seated state senator is I've already been working on these things for many, many years. I have been responsible for getting early childhood programs from birth, as well as, of course, being a very strong supporter of women's rights and contraception and so on. So getting early childhood programs, Head Start and so on. I got the money to build the Head Start facility at Mount Hood Community College when I was serving a decade on their board. The other thing is I've been the author of 3 major nutrition programs. One of the things with these children of poverty is they get their main meal sometimes at school. So we made sure that if the school district provides for a hot lunch, it also has to provide for a breakfast program. And then we passed another bill that says, yes, and you need an after-school program because sometimes that's the only meal they get. And yes, during the 3 months of summer, they need to eat then as well. So school nutrition has been one of my major accomplishments over the last decade.
Well, I was one of those kids. And so what made a difference in my life is having small class sizes, teachers who could recognize that I was struggling in school, that I had something going on, an after-school program that I had an opportunity to attend, and stable housing. Our kids need housing, our kids need health insurance. One of the number one reasons for absenteeism when I was on the David Douglas School Board was just kids being sick or kids with little siblings who are sick and they're having to stay home with them. So in addition to, I agree with what my colleagues up here have said, and the other thing that we have to do is fund summer programs. Studies show that the summer slide is when low-income students, and particularly students of color, fall farther and farther behind because their classmates are off at science camp and astronomy camp and Trackers Earth camp, and when they don't have those opportunities, they come back to the school year the next September farther behind than they were in May when they left.
And this will be Shamia, Kayse, and Rod. This question is about addiction treatment. Oregon ranks almost last in access to addiction treatment and has some of the worst rates of substance abuse, especially in youth. Do you have any plans to address the opioid epidemic or addiction treatment in general?
These are hitting close to home. In 2009, I was by my mom's bedside in the ICU at Portland Adventist Hospital when she overdosed on opioids. She didn't have health insurance, broke a collarbone, and so she took whatever drugs her bar patrons at the Glass House Tavern at 97th and Sandy would give her, and it turned into an overdose. So this is an absolute crisis in our state. And one of the reasons that I won the Multnomah Health Champion Award as a legislator is because we passed a simple bill that said, look, when somebody's experiencing an overdose, somebody can stay with them and administer CPR CPR and call 911 and not worry that they're going to be charged with a drug offense. It was called the Good Samaritan Law, and it was exactly from the experiences that I've lived with my mom, and it literally is changing lives and saving lives today.
So as I said earlier, I actually live a few blocks from a shelter, and I have seen all the challenges that communities are facing. Let me tell you though about addiction. First of all, the first step that we need to deal with addiction is that we need to treat it as a public health issue. It's not a criminal issue. It's not, so we need to stop criminalizing people who have addiction. Secondly, in order to do that, we make sure that we have the resources to do it. Last session, I was one of the people who worked HB 2005, a bill that really deals with issues of decriminalizing addiction. We moved from being treating people who have been kind of small amount of use of drugs from being a felony to a misdemeanor. You know why we did that? Because we want to make sure that people need the support services that they need instead of them criminalizing and instead of them put into jail. And in order to, so that's a reason that why we need to ensure that we have the resources to make sure that they are able to get the services that they need. Thank you.
Mental health addiction on opioids is not just an Oregon problem, it's a national problem. We're hearing more and more about it every day. In some instances, it's the #1 cause of death, maybe even ahead of suicide, which is also a growing cause of death. So it's troubling to me. We need more mental health facilities. We need it to be easier for the people that need the treatment to get the treatment and to get into those facilities. When I was a young once. When I was a young neighborhood activist, like Kayse, our neighborhood association was faced with whether or not to allow the siting of a mental health facility in one of the neighborhoods. And some in the neighborhood association said, not in my backyard, you know, the old NIMBYism. I fought that. I was chair of the neighborhood association, and we got the facility sited, and we began treating addicts right there in our neighborhood.
Let's see. Okay, the next order will be Kayse, Rod, and Shamia, correct? This question is on diversity. How do you plan to engage and represent diverse community members and people of color in this district?
That's an easy question for me. You know, when I came to this great state of Oregon, one of the first things that when I did when second Bush was elected to the office, what I did is bring in diverse immigrant refugee community members together to work for common cause. And then we make sure that we also connected the community of color, long-time community of color. And then we make sure that we connected to the other large community to ensure to build a strong movement for justice. So to me, although Oregon is getting more and more diverse, we have an issue that we need to deal with, which is really how do we create a equitable state. And in order to do that, we make sure that we have to involve people. I have been at the tables where I have seen less and less diversity when we're making huge decisions that make huge impact on people. So to me, making sure that people are at the table, diverse community members at the table to make decisions, that's #1 core values that I bring as a community member. That's what I have been doing for the last 17 years.
Our neighborhoods are becoming more diverse, especially out in this area with gentrification in inner Portland pushing more people of color out. And I think that's a good thing. So when I served on the David Douglas School Board, and by the way, I served on the David Douglas School Board for a decade, not just a few months. When I served on the David Douglas School Board, I made sure that we had programs to meet the needs of those 70 different ethnic groups that were being served. And then I spent a decade on the board of Mount Hood Community College. Again, over half Mount Hood students are students of color. And I've also served 15 years on the board of Warner Pacific College, where 63% of their student body are students of color. Those are positive things. We need to be proud of the diversity of our region and meet the needs of those students and make sure that more diverse students become teachers.
First, let me say this. White allies and accomplices, even the strongest among us, is no replacement for proportional representation for people of color, period. Part of racial justice is proportional representation for people of color at every level of our businesses, our nonprofits, and our government leadership. And while we're at it, one thing that we have to do is audit the slew of new laws that were passed post 9/11 when Oregon had a Republican-controlled legislature. It was open season on xenophobic, anti-immigrant, racist policies, and we need to audit those laws, find the ones that are based on xenophobia and fear and racism, and undo those immediately, full stop.
So you guys are asking awesome questions. I got another good one here, but you should give yourself a hand because I think these are really informative questions. Next will be Shamia, Kayse, and Rod. This question is on the criminal justice reform. What are your ideas about implementing criminal justice reform in Oregon, including mandatory minimums and drug decriminalization?
Yes. So criminal justice reform is a critical issue. It's no secret that our broken criminal justice system disproportionately affects people of color, particularly men of color. And so policy solutions are, yes, those, and also making sure that we record grand juries proceedings in our state. Making sure that we do not allow criminal history to be a barrier to housing, voting, or any type of full employment. And that includes expungement of marijuana offenses. And we also have to make sure that we hold our police accountable and make sure that all of our police statewide are wearing body cameras.
So this issue is really important. I have worked more than a decade to make sure that we have end profiling in this state. I didn't give up. I first started the city of Portland. When that didn't work and we didn't have the leadership that is willing to do it, I ended up going to Salem and make sure that we have HB 2005 and other bills that deal with criminal justice reform. Just this session, as I said earlier, we end profiling, we define profiling and people based on their race, national origin, religion, homelessness. So we work to make sure that people who are protected categories are protected by the law. Secondly, to me, in order to make sure that we have to address this issue as well, we have to implement the policies that we pass. Even though we have the bills, and we do that, every day when I'm driving back from work, you know what I see? I see people of color being pulled over every day, and in the Mexican stations, and on the side of the road in the cars. We want to make sure that our policies are implemented as we pass policies. That's really the key elements that I want to add to you.
Thank you. For almost my entire career in the Senate, I have been the Senate's representative to the Black Commission, the Commission on Black Affairs. There was a time when there were people of color in the Senate, and I asked the rest of the Commission on Black Affairs, would you like me to step aside so that one of them could be appointed? They said, no, we like the work you do, you make a big difference. So this is an issue that I've dealt with for many, many years. Now, one of the things that came to me about a year ago The Justice Department, by the way, I voted against Measure 11, we need to reform it. They came to me about a year ago and said, we have to build a new women's prison. I said, why? Coffee Creek is full. We got to build a new women's prison. I says, why are there so many women being incarcerated? He says, well, they commit drug crimes. I said, violent crimes? No. Property crimes. I said, well, that's not a good reason. I denied them the money, and I'm on the budget committee, to build a new women's prison. It still hasn't been built, and I think it was the right decision.
That goes too far. This next question is for Rod only. The housing inequality and affordability is an ever-increasing challenge in this district. Why should we count on you for support and leadership on this challenge when you have historically not stood with low-income residents of the district on this important issue?
First of all, the last statement is in error. I stand with low-income people all the time. What they need is more housing, more low-income housing, more subsidized housing. I concluded that rent control, and I reviewed what happened in San Francisco and New York, that rent control would do the opposite. It would actually dry up the amount of low-income housing available. And that's why I was not one to support that. But a lot of people accuse me of having voted against Measure 2004. I did not. It never came to a vote in the Senate, and I certainly wasn't the only senator that expressed concerns about it.
Okay, thank you. So the next order again will be Kayse, Rod, and Shamia. The question is tenants. Will you support lifelong pre-exemption to allow local government to address rental policy? Prevent no cause eviction.
Of course, I worked in this issue in the city of Portland, and I worked this issue taken to Salem. The housing issues we have in this state, it's actually a moral issue to me. We have people in our community who are struggling and one paycheck away to be homeless. We have homeless community on the streets. So to me, this is a moral obligation. Not only do we need to protect the renters, we want to make sure that we have no cost eviction. We want to make sure that we have rent control. We want to make sure that people are able to afford where they live, work, and pray. That's number one important issues to me. So as I said earlier, that's a core value that I have. But the second thing is that again, I'm going to go back to economic justice. The reality is that we have to create a livable wage jobs that supports people so they can afford their income. It's simple as that.
Yeah, I've spoken on the issue of rent control already, and I have studied it quite a bit. It just doesn't work. It makes things worse, not better. We need more housing, more subsidized housing, more low-income housing. I suggested certain modifications to our current rules on so-called no cause, but none of them were accepted by the committee. I think there's room for compromise on that. And I've spoken many times with Tina Kotek, Chief Advocate in the House and Speaker, and I believe I can work with her and we can find a proper solution.
Yes, we have to end no-cause evictions. As I mentioned before, my first legal job was I was a pro bono attorney for Oregonians who were being evicted. And the dirty little secret is so often it isn't a no-cause eviction, it's an illegal cause eviction that they don't want to have to disclose. So it's, oh, you complained about your leaky roof? Here's a no-cause eviction. Oh, you worried that rent was going to go up? Well, here's a no-cause eviction. I remember actually in this very room, although the room was set up differently, Community Alliance of Tenants had a forum. I came as a legislator, and I met with people afterwards, after hearing their stories, because of my experience as an attorney. I wanted to help them, and they were terrified to have me call their landlords about leaky roofs and mold and cockroaches, because they were so afraid of getting a no-cause eviction. They're very rarely no-cause. They're illegal cause evictions most of the time.
All right, and our next order will be Ron, Shamia, and Kayse. This topic is rural. Do you have plans to deal with the rural areas that have been neglected in Oregon?
Oh, yes. When we traveled around the state in preparation for the transportation package, it was interesting that some of the needs in the rural areas were pretty much identical to the needs in urban areas. For example, I always thought that mass transit, that mass transit was an urban thing. But we found out all over the state, in small rural communities, that elderly people in particular who couldn't drive anymore were basically locked in their home. It was almost like a prison if they didn't have transit available. And so one of the things we did is made sure that in the transportation package, we would fund rural transportation options all over the state, not just in the urban areas. I have a lot of friends in the legislature that come from the rural parts, rural legislators. Many of them are excellent legislators. I appreciate the opportunity to work with them.
You can take the girl out of Doofer, but you can't take Doofer out of the girl. I still spend a lot of time in rural Oregon. My brother lives in Echo. My other brother lives in Pendleton. My mom lived in Umatilla. Grew up in the Dalles and Doofer. So I agree that there are many similar issues, but there are unique issues out in rural Oregon. And one of the most important things we have done and continue to do is actually extend ballot access. The automatic voter registration that Oregon passed in 2015 greatly benefited rural Oregon, because people, as long as they interacted with the DMV, their voter registration, they were automatically registered, and their registration was updated if they had moved, because giving them the power to actually speak to their own local rural issues, whether it's at the local city level, at the county level, or the state level, is the most important thing we can do, is empower themselves. Shout out to Doofer.
So, you know, as my daytime job, I actually work in the rural community. We have an office in Medford. And when we were trying to do the work in Medford, one of the things that I did, I traveled. I went to the rural community. And I asked them, if we want to work together between urban and rural, let's talk about what's issues and challenges that you have. And they did exactly the same thing. We have housing crisis. We have a lack of economic justice. We have xenophobia. These are the issues that are important to us. And we also said, they said, we have no representation in Salem. And you know what I said? Welcome to my world. And from that moment, we started working, building a bridge between urban and rural community, ensuring that we strategize, we work together, and if we work in the housing issues important, we want to make sure that they work with us in the housing issues important. If we work in economic justice issues, we want to make sure that they work with us in economic justice issues. So to me, that's a natural step to make sure that the rural community and people in the urban area have a bridge and work to put the relationship together in order to make sure that we have a state that is equitable for all.
So you're going to have a hard time out-ruraling me, because Pendleton is only halfway to where I'm from, which is Nissa. And that is rural. The next question we'll start with Shamia. It's on healthcare for all. We have a healthcare crisis. What will you do to provide healthcare for all Oregonians, and do you support single payer?
Do I support single payer? Yes. I didn't have health insurance till I was in my 20s. It means when I broke my leg and my ankle as a little girl, and when I got a molar that abscessed such that it created an external knot on the outside of my face, every insecure high school girl's dream. My dad had to just huddle over our bills at night to figure out how he was going to pay doctor bills and move money and write a post-dated check here. And as I told you about already, with my mom's situation, not having health insurance, leading to an overdose on opioids, we have to have single payer, and we are ripe for it right now. Thanks to the one silver lining of the Republican control of Congress is the fact that Americans right now, particularly the Democratic Party, is overwhelmingly supportive of single payer. Oregon has been a pioneer on incredible issues in the past. We can lead on single payer.
So the answer is very simple. Of course, yes to single payer. But let me tell you something about healthcare. I have my daughter, Shamia Jama, who's sitting in the back. She's 7 years old. She has a feeding tube. Imagine the attacks that is coming from the federal government and our healthcare system. We want to make sure that if Obamacare is being repealed, imagine what it will cost to support my daughter as a child who lives in special needs. So to me, healthcare is one of the most fundamental human rights that we have in this country, in this state, in this world. No one, whether they are immigrants, refugees, or people who are undocumented, no one should be denied to have healthcare. That's why I work for overall kids. That's why I'm supportive for single payers, and I will continue to support healthcare if I'm given the opportunity to serve this district.
I have always been appalled that the United States is the only country in the world that doesn't provide health care as a right. It's deeply troubling to me. I have relatives in Canada. They like it. They like their health care system. It's a single payer system. Strongly support a single payer system. Like to see us go that direction. And if we can't deal with the necessities of healthcare, then something's really wrong. Women dying in birth. We used to think that was something that happened 200 years ago. The rate of women that die in childbirth is higher in this country than virtually any place else in the world. That's because we don't have a single payer system. I will fight with every ounce of energy in me to make this happen. I'm proud of Oregon that we have implemented the Affordable Care Act better than virtually any other state, but it's just a start.
Question for Shamia. Do you think having recently moved to the district will affect your relationship with your constituents?
I moved in June, 1.5 miles from where I lived before. So I grew up in East Portland. My mom bartended at the Glass House Tavern at 97th and Sandy for basically my entire life. I ran the streets and Fred Meyer over at the Halsey Shopping Center. We used to ride the little carts around and stuff. So I moved 1.5 miles from my previous house, so I don't know what moving to the district is particularly implying, but I've lived in the same community. My kids' school didn't change when I moved. My job didn't change when we moved. We simply moved to a different house because we had a second baby in December and wanted some more space.
Okay. This will be the last question that comes from the audience, and then we will have one final question, predefined question. So here we are with Kayse, Rod, and Shamia. Are you a progressive Democrat?
Progressive Democrat. I'm a progressive, yes, but to me that's just a label. What we need to make sure that we have is salient representation. People who understand the challenges, the changes in this district that is taking place, who can have the first view to represent in Salem. That is what needs to happen. And if I'm given the opportunity to serve this district, that is the voice I'm going to be bringing with me to ensure that we have representation in Salem. So yes, I have been fighting for progressive causes all my life since I came to this state, and even when I was in Somalia, I also consider myself as a progressive Somali in Somalia. So yes, we need to make sure that we actually elect more progressive people in this state. That is one of the reasons that I'm running, because we need more voices in Salem. Again, more voices in Salem. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm certainly a progressive Democrat all my life. You can read on this little pamphlet that's being distributed right now. I'm the author of the Martin Luther King School Holiday. I'm one of the authors of the Oregon Promise. I'm the author of Oregon's Indoor Clean Air Act. I've supported women's reproductive health at every stage. I'm one of the authors of the full-day kindergarten program. Issue after issue, I've always been a progressive Democrat. When I was first elected, I was a neighborhood activist fighting the Mount Hood Freeway because it would have torn through our neighborhoods, and instead we've began building transit as an option. So, and I am a bicyclist and so on, but mainly, yeah, I'm a progressive Democrat.
Yes, I'm a progressive Democrat. I'm a proud progressive Democrat. And I'm also a feminist. So I'm a little disappointed that we didn't have any questions tonight on women's issues, right?
So, for the drawing, this is a 50-50 raffle. Whoever's number is drawn gets half of the money that's in that cup right there. And would you be willing to draw out of this bucket? So the number is 626-2980.
I'm going to try and get up.
626-2980.
We have a lucky winner.
2980.
626-2980.
One more call, we'll draw another one.
So going, gone. Has everybody checked their tickets? Okay, I guess we're gonna have to draw another number. Draw one.
626-2708. 2708. $31.50.
Oh, and she's donating it back to the park.
So, you probably all jump up and run out as soon as we're finished. Just in case you do, thank you all for coming. I'll tell you that again in a minute, but and thank all of you for coming and speaking to us tonight. The last question will be answered by Rod Monroe first, Shamia Fagan second, and Kayse Jama third. So the question is, why have you decided to run, and what makes you the best person for the job?
Well, thank you very much, and don't forget to vote for Measure 101, and be sure to get if you're mailing your ballot, be sure to get it in by Friday, or you'll need to drop it off personally. It's very, very important. I guess you'd have to say the main reason why I am running for another term is experience, and experience does make a difference. Takes a while to learn the system. I don't know how many rookie legislators and sometimes even lobbyists come into my office and want me to give them a little Ways and Means 101, because I'm on the budget committee, and the Ways and Means process is terribly complicated if you don't understand it. Being a teacher, an educator, I understand it. I can help with that. Working across the aisle, I have a reputation for being able to work with Republicans and Democrats, some of whom I disagree with, but we need to get things done. So I get things done. I'm the only candidate that I know of that regularly puts his home phone number in the voter's pamphlet so that people, anytime they want to, can call me up and contact me. I'm lucky that the lady back there with the nice white hair that's been married to me for over 50 years is the one you get when you call my home, and she also manages my office in Salem.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some of my family struggles with you tonight. But I want you to know the happy ending. When my mom passed away in October of 2014, she'd been clean for nearly 6 years. She was living in the first house she had ever owned. It was a cute little 900 square foot bungalow in Umatilla, Oregon. But if you'd heard her describe it, you would have thought it was the Buckingham Palace. Because she had so much pride that after a lifetime of transitory living, nobody could take her home away. And the minister who performed her service captured my mom's journey perfectly when she said, Trish reached the place of an ordinary life. Just an ordinary life. A job and a house and a dog. But it didn't just happen to her. She fought for it with everything she had in her. Too many of us are like my mom, fighting just for the stability of an ordinary life. A job that pays enough, a house you won't be kicked out of, and a dog, or the means to care for somebody else. But despite Democratic majorities in the Senate for over a decade, the Senate is now the place where progressive solutions go to die or be severely weakened. And the people in this room pay the price. Let's talk about a few things that would have helped. The Fair Scheduling Act, designed to protect workers from last-minute schedule changes, was weakened in the Senate to only cover employees who work for giant corporations with 500 or more employees. So working parents, does it make you feel better knowing that a few Republicans were made happy to weaken this law? Does that make juggling childcare when you get a last-minute shift call a little easier? Or the Oregon Equal Pay Act for women, also significantly weakened by the Senate to gain Republican votes. Women, does that 79 cents spend a little better to know that there was a Republican and Democrat photo op after the bill passed? And renter protections, dead in the Senate. So renters, show of hands, does it ease your fear of eviction or skyrocketing rents to know that Democrats are still working on some ideas with Republicans in the landlord lobby? No. As a mother of 2 kids who deserve better than what I had, I simply cannot wait another day for the Senate to do better. That's why this campaign is about a revolution in the Oregon Senate, for you in this room, and for all of our somebodies. Because we deserve to be secure in our homes, in our healthcare, in our schools, and in our jobs. My name is Shamia Fagan, and I'm asking for your vote on May 15th.
First of all, thank you so much for all of you coming tonight and listening to us. This has been a great opportunity as the first-time candidate of elected office. You know, for me, why I decided to run this seat. I remember trying to advocate HB 2004 in Salem and trying to make sure that that bill passes. And then coming back and see how Salem is broken every single day because there's a small group of people who are coming to a room making huge decisions that has implications in this community. I am mad as hell to make sure that there's a new change in leadership in this district, and to make sure that we have built a people's power in this community. So that's what I want to make sure as a community organizer, the people in this community represented themselves and their voices have been heard, as someone who's also struggled in the past. Secondly, I am also running a new work every day, work with the issues in the community. And I am a black, Muslim, refugee, former refugee. You can see I'm also a facilitator, a community organizer, a community leader. And at the end of the day, I want to make sure that our district is represented people who have bring at the table more diverse background, to make sure that we have a diverse perspective. So for me, that's one of the reasons that I'm running, and I want to make sure that all the community who are here tonight to understand that we need a leadership change in Salem. And I'm asking your vote. Thank you.
So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Shamia Fagan, Kayse Jama, and Monroe. 3 great candidates, 3 progressive candidates. It's up to all of you now who get to vote in May, but there's going to be a lot of work between now and May because we got to pass Measure 101. Remember that we are the Multnomah County Democratic Party. If you're a Democrat, you're welcome to join us. Become a PCP. We work locally. Yes, we're all Democrats. If we're Democrats, that means we're part of the national party, but we're the local party and we work local. So thank you for coming. If you have any questions, I suppose you can chat with these guys. And we've got maybe 5-10 minutes before we have to, you can mingle 15 minutes and then we'll be done. Thank you.